Today, I would like to share with you the experience of working with decision makers in the process of creating an early warning system. I will try to summarize. Hold on a second, please. Okay, I will try to summarize the work that the National Weather Service has done in the recent years in working with users to improve our early warning system. I have decided to organize the presentation in a sequential way, so I will tell you how we have done this from the beginning, that is, how we work to identify the weaknesses of the system. Then, once the Meteorological Service decided to update the warning system, what we have done in the last 4 years to manage to correct the vulnerabilities found. I will also share with you how we work with users in the months prior to the implementation, basically all 2020. And finally, how we will continue to incorporate the perspective of the users once the new system is implemented, which will be in a few weeks. So for a matter of time, I will only tell you some examples of the implementing techniques along the process that I think can be useful in any context. So I must apologize because it is possible that many of you have already seen this drawing in previous presentation of mine. I will explain why, because surely there are new people in the room and it is an exercise that I like very much for its simplicity and the amount of information it gave us. Okay, so in the left side of the presentation, you will see a text that is in Spanish. It's an all-weather warning from the year 2015. We wanted to confirm some system vulnerabilities. So in a workshop that we made with more than 100 emergency managers, we did the following exercise. We gave all the same warning text, that is this one, and we asked participants to individually draw the warning they had in a text on a map of Argentina. So the result, each participant drew a completely, as you can see, a completely different interpretation of the same warning. Some even divided the regions according to the severity of the phenomenon, others according to the time of arrival of the storms, and others just divided the different phenomena and just distribute them all over the place. So although this might seem funny at some point, it is a very difficult fact to ignore that everyone was misinterpreting what the forecaster had meant, or rather, these warning messages sometimes are full of flaws. And these are some of the ones we identified. For example, we have extremely confusing coverage area. Users are confused about whether or not they are included in a warning. The warning are in text format, so there is no possibility of inserting in any geographic information system, on apps or different platforms, which restricts very much the access to the information. We also have very technical language to describe the phenomenon. Also, there is no visual distinction about the severity of the phenomena. This leads to everyone interpreting the severity as they can, and we also have no recommendations on what to do. So here is another example of how we work with users in consultation of warning thresholds. Beth mentioned something before about this work. So when the Met Service decided to change this warning system, as you can imagine, a lot of work and many questions arise on multiple levels. One of these questions was, how do we make sure that the thresholds of the new system are not only climate thresholds without having too much information about the impact? What else can we do? So we are one of those countries that are in the middle of the way, because we can improve our warning system, but the country does not produce systematized information of impacts in such a way that we can implement, for example, IVF. So what do? We decided to work on involving users in a part of this very complex conversation. We did a survey. But this survey that we did, it was at each weather service observation spot in the territory. But this survey had a special feature. It had to be completed jointly and by consensus by the leader of the office of the weather station and the local civil protection. this survey had to answer very specific questions, such as, for example, the one that you can see here. For example, from how many kilometers per hour the wind start to be a problem from the normal development of daily activities? So this question was repeated by several phenomena in such a way that we tie the experience of who makes the observation to the experience of whoever responds to a severe event at a local level. So this gave us an approximation and was a source of reference that came in comparison with the strictly climate thresholds. So to that experience, we add a database that you can see here in these maps, created by us with reports on social media and local media news in a determined period of time. And we also made some data collection through surveys that systematize the experience in terms of thresholds of operational forecasters, because many of them have 10, 20 or 30 years of experience in issuing warnings, and it was really necessary to be able to contrast this knowledge with the climate thresholds as well. So based on this information that you can see here, some thresholds were adjusted for 5 phenomena. These phenomena are wind, sonda wind, that it's a special wind that have place in the Andes region of Argentina, rain, storm, and snow. So you can see it in the maps here in the bottom on the right side. So these thresholds, when the new early warning system is implemented, they will be published in our website. Okay, so 2 more examples about how we work with users, and this point in conceptualizing the warning levels. The system to be implemented had a preset definition by colors: green, yellow, orange, and red. So based on the comparison analysis and a review of papers that we did on risk communication and risk perception, we decided to establish 4 definitions for each color of warning and test them with a group of people with different profiles. For example, citizens without any knowledge of meteorology, meteorologists of our agency, and decision makers from the DRR arena. From these results, we can see not only what they understand, but also what they expect from an early warning system. So there is a final report done about this study. It is in Spanish, but I'm more than happy to share it with you. We use those definitions, these definitions actually, that user choice as the most understandable and those that prompt them to make a decision. So it is not just about interacting with users to see the thresholds, but also to make an understandable definition of each level and color of warnings. So as you can see, we also take advantage of this study to ask many other questions that help us to analyze different topics. Okay, so this is one of the last slides. You will see full of information. This is another work that we did with users, but in this case, not necessarily with emergency agencies. So to analyze the colors and icons of this new early warning system, we entered a process of a study of understanding the iconography, and we made tests within our organization with people, again, with different backgrounds. And you can see how the icons were mutated here, for example, and here, this is sonda wind. And then we decided to use familiar symbols and languages, such, for example, road signs, to distinguish warnings with triangle shape. This is, and the advisory system that the early warning system includes itself as with rhombus shapes. But then we went further and work with another expert user in accessibility, such as the National Agency of Disability of Argentina. So they advised us on the web visualization and its levels of accessibility. And on the right side here, let me see. Okay, here you can see one of the exercises made for people with reduced vision that made us change, for example, the color palette of the warning levels. You can see the difference of the colors here. So this work is, in my opinion, outstanding because it is necessary to make the exercise of thinking about early warning systems, and accessibility so that the system managed to cover the whole population. Okay, I promise that from now on the presentation will not have so much visual information. So now we already designed the system. We are in these previous stages before the implementation, and while our colleagues, meteorologists and developers are working hard on the implementation and testing, those of us who work with users decided to implement a series of workshops prior to the implementation, since it is extremely important that this system is not even an overnight news, especially for the DRR users. So during 2020, we established a work plan in which we reached more than 1,000 decision makers through a series of workshops and virtual trainings. Why virtual trainings? Well, of course, we were planning to travel around the country to train emergency agencies on site, but that was not possible because of the pandemic. So we put together a handbook for different decision makers that contains a detailed description of the system and includes all the thresholds, all the recommendations to the population, and details of how each area will be named jointly with its local government's nomenclature. So this work was done in the last 3 months. As you can see, we reached a variety of very important users who already know the system, will be, although we will present it into the public in 20-25 days. So doing all this presentation process, not only in the work with emergency managers or different users, but also all the work behind the scenes of the med service team that was done from home in a pandemic context, I think this is the biggest effort to be highlighted at this point. Okay, so after the implementation, the system will be implemented really soon, as I said before. What are our plans to continue working on the new system with users? Well, I think of it as a cycle. Now we have to accompany the implementation using every channel available, but then start to work all over again to survey the uses, the weaknesses, the adjustment that will have to be made in the future, as well as to establish continuous collection, data collection strategy that will allow us to adjust again the thresholds annually with users, of course. Okay, here you can see a little bit about the system. As you can see, it is a system that provides warnings for rain, storm, snow, wind, and sonda wind, as I said before. It also provides information, but in a form of advisory for extreme and low temperatures, reduced visibility due to the presence of dust, smoke, volcanic ash, and fog. And as you can see, the advisory system has only 2 colors, and the color violet will only indicate that there is an active advice for those phenomena that I mentioned before. This has to do with the fact that we are still missing enough observations to be able to establish threshold levels as we are able to do with the other warning phenomena. But this is definitely something that we will work on in the future. So the whole system has an anticipation of 3 days and will be in CAP format. And this information will also be complemented by the short-term storm forecast, which is radar-based information, and the heat and cold wave warning system that is already in place. And we also designed a special service for emergency agencies that you can see here, this one, in which detailed information is sent to them every time there is an update of the warning on the day, so they can reply the information easily. Okay, so I'm very close to the end of my presentation, and I want to take advantage of this opportunity to highlight some lessons learned along the way regarding the evaluation of services from the perspective of different users. The first one, once you start working with users to update a service, it is not an end user anymore. The user is everywhere in your creative process. This is a very powerful concept of co-design. The second one, Sustaining links over a long period of time increase the confidence in the participation of co-creation processes. So it is very important recommendation that there should be professionals specifically dedicated to carrying and maintaining these links. The third one, and I don't know why, but my favorite one, work with social sciences. Because, for example, anthropologists, geographers, sociologists specialized in disaster risk reduction, as well as communicators and the regular disciplines of any meteorological service have participated in the whole process. But this leads me to say that beyond the fact that the system has to be built on a profoundly transdisciplinary basis, it is an achievement that, for example, in each meeting full of colleagues from different disciplines, the question of most of the meetings was, what does the user want? What does the user need? Let's just find that out. So, and this is a great achievement in any meteorological service. The fourth one, share your question with the other DRR agencies that monitors other hazards, because they might have the same questions that you have. So you have to work together, because if you're able to answer those questions, it is possible that you may be improving the whole system, the whole DRR system. And finally, don't go back, because once you start working with users, you may want to apply these techniques in every weather or climate service improvement. And they will be really, they will be better services. And of course, you have to be patient, because as you can see, the work that I showed is a 5 years work. So you have to be patient, because progress takes a long time. So to finish, I want to share with you a testimony of a civil protection user who said these words in one of the last workshops that we made. He pointed out that he remembered when we went in 2016 to his town to collect his needs and the information on the use of the warning system. So the fact that he remembered these instances of contact and that he understands that this information was used to improve the system and therefore his decision making was a small sample of how the risk management system with all its components fits itself and improve itself only if these relationships are built and something is done with it. So I hope this information was useful for you. That is all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hule. That was great.
We have one question from Marta Vinuka. She says, "Will the manual that you are showing, will this be available on the web?"
Yeah, well, we actually, this is a good question, because we made different manuals, handbooks for different users. So we have one handbook for the audience, the general public, and we also have manuals for emergency agencies. So if you speak Spanish, I'm more than happy to send the manual for emergency agencies for you.
Great. We have a slightly light-hearted one here, I think, from Harold Richter. Julia, how did you overcome user survey fatigue given the multitude of surveys you ran? It says, did you offer chocolate?
No, we didn't. I wish I could, but okay. Yes, that's a nice question. The thing that maybe it wasn't very clear in the presentation, that this was the work that we have done in the last 5 years. So it's not that we were, all the time knocking at users' door to please complete this survey, please complete this survey. It was not like that. And it is something important to be aware of, that it's not that you always are going to knock on the same user doors. Okay, sometimes you work with national organizations. Other times you need to work at a provincial level. Other times you need to work with the scientific sectors. Other time you need to work with local governments. So there is not this is not always the same user that we bother.
Great. Here's one from Darren Griffiths. Great to acknowledge the achievement in the context of the pandemic. Question, do you have a fixed lead time for moving from alerts to warnings? I'm thinking some phenomena can be warned with a longer lead time than others. Will your maps show, and this is sort of a separate question, I guess, will your maps show both alerts and warnings concurrently?
Well, yes, definitely. Actually, in the website, okay, I cannot go back to the presentation, but I didn't show in the presentation how the system will look like in the website. But in the website, actually, everything will be overlap. You can overlap warnings and alerts and different lead time information.
Okay, we have a few more questions, but we're basically up to time. I don't know, can I go through them, Beth, or?
Mark, we're doing all right. We can go for another 10 minutes.
Oh, okay.
So we've got 2 hours altogether. So we're
All
fine.
right. Okay, so you don't want to necessarily stick to the exact program. Okay, so okay, so Rob Taggart, haven't read this one yet. So traditional text-based warning products are still useful, as was demonstrated in the New South Wales bushfires, when some communities were cut off from the outside communication apart from radio. Radio presenters reading out text messages. Has your team worked on ways to overcome difficulties in user interpretation of text-based warnings?
Well, I'm sorry. I will read the question. Has your team worked on ways to overcome? Yes. Well, okay. So the one of the things that we identified in the text warnings, in regarding the interpretation topic, was the technical language. All right. Some of the text warning were the language was very technical. Not in all of them, but in some of them, and this confused the user, especially the emergency managers users, because the reality of emergency managers in Argentina is very heterogeneous. So they don't have all the same capabilities to understand what the information that they are receiving. So at this point, I totally agree that text warning. Actually, yeah, maybe I made a mistake in the presentation, because it seemed that our new early warning system won't have text at all. Actually, it will have text. Every warning has text related to it, so it will. But in my opinion, some of these flaws that we identify has been corrected in the way that we organize or reorganize this warning text, because it is better organized. Actually, Rob, if you can write me an email that I can put my email on the chat, I can show you some of the work that we have done regarding your question.
Okay, next one, John Nen. I don't really understand this question, but it's probably due to my poor English. But anyway, I like the social approach. Do you have epidemiological input into the development of impacts as well?
No, we don't. What I can say about early warning and health sector is that, for example, our heat wave early warning system was developed with the health ministry, and it has mortality impact information. But at this point, epidemiological input, it's not on this early warning system. For now, I mean, I'm not. Yeah, maybe in the future, I'm sure we will have to, introduce that kind of information.
Okay, thanks. Marta says she speaks Spanish, so that's good.
Okay.
That's fine.
Gracias.
Steve Goodman, the use of dashboards seems to be gaining popularity. Can the user, say, emergency manager, drill down by clicking an icon to view radar or satellite loops in addition to numerical weather prediction fields?
Okay, drill down.
Sort of clicking in and seeing more information as you.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, all this information is complemented by radar images and satellite images. And actually, I have to say that I definitely agree with Steve, because emergency agencies tend more and more to use radar and satellite information to make decisions. But I also have to say that it's really important that weather service accompany this use of the satellite and radar information. Actually, we're doing that in Argentina in a local project that we have. Yeah.
Okay, so a comment from Harold Brooks. In our experience in the weather community in Norman, one of the valuable aspects of developing products with users is that you get a group of users who have an investment in the new product. They also understand the challenges of development and forecasting.
Yes, this is a great comment, because every time that we go back to the user or we try to explain, for example, it's a daily basis on knowledge for us, but when you go to emergency agency, even more if it is a local emergency manager, and you explain to them how complex it is to create a forecast and how many research do you have and how much information do you need, they start to understand why sometimes it's kind of difficult to, yeah, to not only to understand a warning message, but also to be accurate, to have accurate messages. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, Joanne Robbins, great presentation. Thanks, Julia. You mentioned the importance of building long-lasting user relationships. You do. How do you recommend maintaining these effectively? I'm thinking that with turnover in the responder community and the resource requirements to maintain these relationships, it might be quite challenging.
Yes, but you know what? I do. But you know what? I learned something from this pandemic context, working with user in a pandemic context. And believe me, it was not easy at all to work with emergency agencies during a pandemic and trying to train them on an early warning system, because, you know, we were not the problem for them this year. So it was really hard. But at the same time, we also depend a lot on traveling to the provinces, going to local governments, you know, and that is when you need, for example, of course, financial resources. But now with the pandemic, look how we reach 1,000 emergency managers from home. So I think that in the future, we will need to use more and more the technology to work with emergency agencies, and we will need to develop more and more, yeah, different tools to develop this, to increase and maintain this relationship, but also to collect data, because we can be there, we can be together in the same place, at least for the next year. So in order to finish answering this question, we already have a plan for the 2021, and we already know how we will collect again and to reach again these users in order to understand how they are using this early warning system. And every time you get a call, you send an email, you ask how they are, or maybe post event you call, and this is the way that you can keep a good relationship. So when you need some information, they will definitely come back to you and give you what you need. So it's very important. For me, as a sociologist, I can say that it's very important to be there for them and to build a relationship. This is something that usually is not mentioned in this kind of presentations.
Thanks very much. That's it from all the questions here. Thanks a lot, Julia.
Okay. Thank you, Yuli. That was fantastic, and I think it provoked a lot of really interesting discussion too. So let's go on to our fourth speaker, Amanda, presenting on fire atmosphere model verification. So over to you, Amanda.
Great.